Hello, Chicago, and welcome to Chicago Sports Podcast with the Monsters of the Madhouse. I am your host, Brandon Duplessis, and I am excited to introduce you guys to Taylor Dow. How you doing tonight, Taylor?
Hey, I'm good. How you doing?
Good. So you're the co-host on Helmets, Heels, and Hits?
Yes. So I co-host for Helmets and Heels here in Jacksonville for the Jaguars affiliate station, but then I also host a podcast called Making Monsters, and so that I do a little bit of both. Cover two separate teams, but I grew up a Bears fan, so that one is a little closer to my heart.
Okay. You said you grew up a Bears fan?
Yeah.
Okay. So an Indiana girl who still wears her Chicago Notre Dame sports heart on her sleeve while informing thousands of listeners and viewers as the co-host of Jacksonville's XL's hit sports talk radio show Helmets and Heels. The Super Bowl Nation's Making Monsters for Windy City Gridiron. She is also Jackson's radio sports social media director. Oh, that's cool. Um, so first question is, how does an always almost on the move sports personality such as yourself celebrate the 4th of July?
Well, luckily, even at 1010XL, we get 4th of July off. So we will be doing a pool day, hopefully, barring weather, because this time of year in Florida rains every day. So we're hoping that we get at least a little bit of pool day tomorrow, cook out, have some drinks, whatever. And then I have a concert later at night, actually, I'm going to. So concert and fireworks later. But I also do have Friday off. I went ahead and took an extra day just to get a little extended vacation holiday going.
There you go. Yeah, I got a 4-day weekend. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, same.
So you saw Caleb Williams coming as the next Bears quarterback before almost all of us did. What about his game, his leadership skills, his work ethic, and his personality tell you that he will succeed?
Yeah, I am really close with some people down here that Caleb trains with. So back in probably February, before the Justin Fields trade even came, I was talking to some people. This is just to preface what it means by I knew Caleb was coming to Chicago. But yeah, so I heard some chirping here in Jacksonville before even the Fields trade happened that it was already pretty much decided. And this was coming like Caleb hadn't been directly told, but the camp had kind of been notified that the Bears had made a decision. I said it to a few people, and everybody that I said it to was like, there's no way, like they're not allowed to, obviously, but there was a lot of things kind of going on. And then very quickly within the next like 2 weeks, Justin Fields ended up being traded. So, and then since then, we've heard some reports that kind of match up perfectly with my timeline of what I was kind of hearing rumblings with it. But the guy that I work with, his name's Denny Thompson. He is like a quarterback trainer down here in Jacksonville, and he trains a ton of different guys: Brock Purdy, Anthony Richardson, Gardner Minshew, Carson Beck, a ton of different people. Caleb worked with him and Hewlett all this offseason. And so Denny's gone very in depth with me about the things that Caleb's able to do. And starting with on the field, one of the things that popped out to me when he was telling me about Caleb was just the way the ball comes out of his hands and the consistency at which it does. Because Caleb, he said, has about a 10 mile per hour, like different speed that he can release the ball, but the ball comes out with the same form, the same spiral, the same release, everything. And he just said, normally you don't see that. Usually he said it's about 4 to 5 miles per hour that you'll see the difference between some of these quarterbacks' balls. But Caleb's able to do this at such a high level and with such different intensity in his passes that's the way he's able to hit every spot of the field that maybe some other quarterbacks aren't able to hit. So that's one of the things that always stood out to me because I'm no quarterback guru. And so hearing these little intricate things about how Caleb's just the spin on the ball and the release are so different than others. Also, when it comes to off the field, I think we heard a lot of the kind of critiques before the Justin Fields trade and when we were getting out of USC. Yeah, we were hearing it. Don't like him and all of it. He's diva, Hollywood, blah, blah, blah. I fell into some of it. I'll admit that I was guilty of falling into some of the things. Also, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I saw kind of the fingernails, the Irish Notre Dame field, the fingernails and all of that stuff. And I just wasn't a huge fan of some of it at the time. But the more I've gotten to know the type of person Caleb is, the more it kind of all just makes sense and you kind of take it at a different glance. And this is something Denny talked to me about too. So Denny, even who, like I said, was one of the guys working with him this offseason, when the Caleb versus Justin Fields chatter first started. He was like, you guys are crazy. Like, I don't know why you're doing this. I'm not a big fan of him. His dad's very involved in a lot of the process of Caleb Williams. I'm not sure how that's going to go in the NFL. Previously, when you have quarterbacks whose parents are big and vocal, or not even quarterback, let's just say athletes, we see the Ball family and how that's gone for some of that when it comes to the dad and all the brothers. He kind of related it to that. After working with him for like 3 weeks, I'll say about 3 weeks later, he came into my office and he was like, I'm wrong about Caleb. He's fantastic. He's a fantastic football player. He's a fantastic human. He was like, he's one of the best, like the hardest workers I've ever been around. He's staying at all of the training longer than anybody else to help everybody. All the younger quarterbacks were there because it is high school quarterbacks, college quarterbacks, NFL quarterbacks, all kind of in a mix doing stuff together at certain times. And he was just saying how vocal he was with all of them, like learning from the veteran guys, but teaching the younger guys. And it's been really fun to kind of watch his progress. And so Denny coming to me and saying that to me within a 3-week span, I was like, okay, well, I'm starting to get a little excited here. And then we start seeing the interviews. We see the combine interview of him just talking about mental health awareness and like him being comfortable in the person he is and how big of an impact his parents were and just everything throughout his career from high school to college. This kid in high school, if you watch the pivot, was staying by himself, had his own apartment in high school away from his parents. That just sounds like a recipe for disaster when you give a 16, 17-year-old kid their own apartment in Washington, D.C. And you never hear of him having any troubles when it comes to off the field issues, on the field issues, people not liking him. And so to me, the more I hear about that, the more I'm like, this guy is just the most comfortable guy in the world with the type of person he is. What he loves to do is football, number one. And I think that's an important thing. I did a podcast a few months ago with Coach DiFilippo. And it was when all the stuff was coming out about Justin Fields and Nick Foles not getting along and the toxicity of that locker room. And I was asking, Coach DiFilippo, what stands out to quarterbacks who are the most successful and really pan out in the NFL, other than just like their arm strength or whatever. And DiFilippo was like he was like, quarterback is more than just a job. It is a way of life. And if you don't have that mentality, it's not going to work long-term. It's not going to be consistent. He's like, there's a reason guys like, when you talk about a guy like Tom Brady was able to do what he did because football was life for him. And not everybody has that, not saying that they don't have the talent, but Caleb has that. Caleb has that football is life mentality. He has other things that he's interested in. So it's not like he is just one of these guys who every day lives and breathes. But when football is there, it's what's most important to him. So that's just a few of the things that Denny talked to me about and that he learned. And then once the combine hit and we were hearing these interviews and since then on the pivot and all of these other things, I think we've just really learned that he's probably the most comfortable 22-year-old male I've ever met in my life, because I always joke about it. I'm like, I was not like that when I was 22 years old. Like I was not that mature and like self-aware as Caleb Williams is right now.
Yeah, it's really good insight. You don't really hear too much about the velocity of a quarterback so much as you do in like the game of baseball, but I didn't know that, what you had just said, that his speed can change in a 10-mile-per-hour range. But yeah, no, it's incredible. Like you said, the guy was living on his own during high school, and most people probably wouldn't handle that in the most responsible way. And I think at every stage of his career, his tenure, he's kind of proven to people he's not about messing around. He's about the game of football. He loves the game of football. Yeah. Actually, I bought into Caleb Williams. I mean, I've liked him for a few years. I remember texting a couple of buddies of mine when you replaced Rattler in Oklahoma, saying like, "Hey, remember this guy's name. I think he's going to be special." So it's cool to see he's on the Bears. But I listened to a Randy Trivers interview on The Score. Did you get a chance to hear that? The high school coach? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, those guys are going to say what they need to say to support their player. They're not going to kind of, burn their guy down. But you could tell he was sincerely, telling the Chicago Bears fan base like this dude is special, and he's not just special as a player. He's special in a lot of ways. He's special as a person. And then Ryan Poles kind of, I don't think Ryan Poles is the Bears organization seems to be pretty honed in on character.
Yeah.
And once you hear that Poles and Eberflus and these guys liked him, I was like, well, then he's got to be all right, because they don't really shy away from, I think a lot of people got down on the Bears for not drafting Jalen Carter, but I think I think it was just a concern over character abuse more than anything, because we know the guy can play football. So,
Yeah.
really, really cool stuff, though. I have to ask you then, as a Notre Dame fan,
Yeah.
how much stock did you put into the game Caleb Williams had against Notre Dame? Because that's the one that's widely regarded as his worst performance in college football.
Yeah, I've talked about that a few times. I did a podcast about a month ago with Coach Travers too, his high school coach. I also talked to his high school offensive coordinator, who a lot of people heard the story about Caleb Williams breaking his high school coordinator's wedding ring during one of their practices. So I talked to both of them. I also talked to someone who covered the Pac-12 football, who called many games and worked very closely. His name's Yogi Roth. I have not heard one single bad thing about Caleb Williams. And like you said, like coaching wise, you get that sometimes because it's their guys. But the Pac-12 guy has no affiliation to Caleb Williams. He did not have one single bad thing to say. And every time I would have, because this is pre me starting to really fall for Caleb, and I was like testing him. I was pushing some buttons with Yogi, like, what about this situation we heard? What about, because there was moments he wouldn't shake players' hands after a game. There was moments he walked off of during a press conference because he was upset after the game. We had the crying situation with his mom, the vulgar on his fingernails, all of these things. So I kind of tested all of that. And Yogi had, for each thing I had, was just like, when you get to know Caleb Williams, you'll understand all of these things more. He's passionate. He loves football. His parents are his world. And if you watch the pivot, he mentioned, he was like, I was upset. I didn't cry though until I saw my mom in the crowd, but it was more of that feeling like this is one of the last times I'm ever going to play a college football game. And my mom is standing there, in the stands watching me leave in one of my final games. But going back to your question about Notre Dame, I joke about it a lot. And every person I've talked to, I say, unfortunately, probably his worst college football game was against Notre Dame, which is very close to Chicago, obviously. And there are a lot of Notre Dame fans. So a lot of people were probably watching that game. A lot of Bears fans were watching, or at least seeing highlights of that game. If they watched any Caleb Williams game, chances are it was probably that one, which is unfortunate for Caleb. I think that it's hard not to put a little bit of stock in that. And I saw a comment pop up a little bit ago about him holding the ball too long. And I had a lot of those were a lot of my criticisms coming into this offseason. And that's why I wanted to I talked to so many different people about him, just because I wanted to get the inside of this, because everything I was hearing were the biggest issues with Caleb Williams is he's going to hold the ball too long. And there's a little baby things that kind of linger on that reminded me a lot of Justin Fields' issues too. And so it was always weird to me that I'm like, we're replacing one quarterback whose biggest faults are the same faults of the quarterback that we have now in Justin Fields, now former Bear. But everybody I talked to had a lot of reasonings for why these things happen. Caleb does have to improve with that. That's something that has kind of been part of it. I do think that the talent around him at USC did affect that in certain moments. And for me, going back to that Notre Dame game, it was a lot of that. When I was watching the game, I remember just thinking okay, they were telling me, all these people were telling me a whole lot about Caleb Williams, and I'm not seeing it in this football game. When you go back and you watch and you rewatch and you see other games of Caleb Williams, you can really see the faults around him when it comes to the offensive line, when it comes to the defense, when it comes to some of the weapons that were happening that game. I also know Notre Dame's defense was really, really good too. I mean, it was just kind of their biggest strength. And so it wasn't an easy test, but then that's what people question. Okay, well, is he going to be able to play against good opponents? And I know some of my guys from Windy City Gridiron had broke down his games versus ranked teams, and he has really good numbers against ranked teams. People don't want to point that out because they want to point to maybe that Notre Dame game or a couple of the other that he wasn't at his best. But when you take the full of any ranked opponent he played, and I wish if I could bring it up, I would. I'll retweet it later for people that want to see it. But they broke down just his ranked opponents and his stats against that. And he's pretty dang good against some really, really strong opponents. And people want to laugh about the Pac-12 too, but there was a lot of Pac-12 sitting at the top of the rankings last year. A lot of Pac-12 guys drafted in this last draft. And so people can joke about it all they want, but the Pac-12 was not an easy conference the last couple years. They went out with a bang for sure. And I think that kind of being able to see Caleb Williams outside of just one game, everybody's going to have their one game. It's just unfortunate that it was that Notre Dame game, because people are that's the closest to home for a lot of people up there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I talked to a lot of people, obviously when Fields was still on the team, I was a pretty big advocate of moving on from Fields and drafting Caleb Williams. I talked to a lot of people, and you're 100% right. Every time somebody kind of rebutted what I said about Caleb Williams, it had to do with that Notre Dame game. And I would often ask them, like, have you watched any of Caleb Williams outside of that football game? You know what I mean? Because, he's done just as many good things in other games as he did bad in that game. And I also believe quarterbacks need those games. I really do, like the games where they're going to struggle. Everything doesn't go well, and like you said, the talent around Caleb didn't really help him out with what is almost a pro defense. Like you said, Freeman runs almost a pro defense over there. So I thought he responded well when the interior pressure got through. He got rid of the ball quickly, and as bad as game as he played, he probably learned a lot in that game in regards to things that are going to transition to the NFL. Because let's be honest, I don't know where the Bears' offensive line is currently ranked in Pro Football Focus, but on paper, it's not looking like it's going to be a top 10 unit. So he's going to get pressure. They're going to get overwhelmed. So I think games like
they have it at like 12. I think I saw.
Yeah, I thought like 10 to 15 somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I did. You
so
posted
this
a
comment too. Sorry, I wanted to talk to this Cliff guy because he was like the fumbles. So that's two of the things. When I said the holding the ball too long and the fumbles, those were two things. Obviously, Justin Fields struggled with too, and so those were a lot of the things that I had a ton of questions on. And so when it comes to the holding the ball in general, when I made that comment, we criticized Justin a lot last year because he had like the longest time to throw in the NFL. I want to say it was like 3.14 seconds or something like that. Caleb Williams 2 seasons ago was 3.46 seconds. And then last year it went down to like 3.26. He also holds the ball a lot and too long. He also fumbles. He had like 30 something fumbles, I think. Mm-hmm. And so that's definitely something you have to keep an eye on. The one thing that I do think for Caleb in those scenarios is it's a lot of hero ball to me. It's a lot of times when he was having to do so much, and we saw it with Justin too. Justin also was just a little lazy sometimes with the ball. We'd see it just hanging completely out to the side, no protection whatsoever when it comes to fumbles. A lot of Caleb's was him trying to like make the most of something when there was absolutely nothing. And so when you go back and you look at a lot of the fumbles, there were those situations. But I do think, especially coming off of what had happened the last couple seasons, when it comes to holding the balls too long and those fumbles, I do think they're going to, one thing, the checkdowns. One thing, Justin just did not like to turn there. He didn't like the short yardage. He struggled bad between like 10 and 19 yards. He did not want to pass the ball within that range. I think they're going to be able to do that a little easier this season with the weapons they have. And I do think that opens up the offense a little bit more. So it gives Caleb that opportunity to not have to hold the ball so long because he's not having to look 25 yards downfield. Like a lot of times I feel like Justin Fields was having to do, and then Caleb also was having to do in college. When you see a lot, you go back, just watch Caleb film, and it's like the amount of times he just had to launch it down the field 40 yards because there was just nothing else in front of him. And so I do think guys like him who do have the ability to move around a little bit and make some plays sometimes try to get a little too creative and fancy, and it bit him several times, obviously having that many fumbles. But I do think that's going to be two things that the Bears are going to work heavily on, are making those easy plays for him, having that easy button, the short mid-range midfield check down type of stuff, and then also really practicing on being like, put that ball in a place where nobody can knock it out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And there's no denying it, no matter how much you love Caleb or didn't like Fields. I mean, their struggles are very much one and the same. I do think that Caleb's strengths are a little better than Justin's are. Caleb's not a guy, we heard him say he's not a guy who loves to run the ball if he can prevent it. But I agree with you. And Justin Fields also had lazy footwork, if you ask me. I mean, he just didn't look urgent ever to me. And it was like behind a spotty offensive line, he didn't play with any urgency. But yeah, I agree with you. Caleb clearly felt like he needed to do too much in order to win games for that USC team. I think their defense allowed 35 points per game or something. I mean, he was going to have to score a lot of points for USC to win any games. And then I also think I saw a statistic, and you would probably think like a lot of Bears or a lot of football fans would think this is a good number, but Justin Fields had an 89% completion rating behind the line of scrimmage, which is actually egregiously low. It places him, I think, 24th in the league. So you're right. When it came to those check down passes, he wasn't very successful at that either.
And he also had, and this was in college too, this was what frustrated me the most during, and I know we're not here to talk about Justin Fields, but something that I do think the Bears will work on. because it's more so of that. It's more so fixing the way that everything went this last time you drafted this quarterback and making it right around him to be able to have a rookie quarterback be successful. And you want to help them as much as no matter how good they are, you want to help them as much as possible until they're comfortable in the NFL. And Justin Fields already had one of the highest, or if not the highest, pressure to sack rate in college football. He always had a huge that was always a big number for him. That was something they talked about coming into to the NFL. So what do you think a football team would do when a quarterback struggles with that is build an offensive line before in front of him. Unfortunately, the Bears never really built the strongest line in front of Justin Fields, and the pieces that they did add weren't able to stay on the football field healthy. So that hurt. Caleb's is not great. Caleb has a pretty high pressure to sack rate too, but not as high as Justin Fields. But my whole point in that is I do think that some of the moves that the Bears made this offseason in, trying to fix that center position, because that was just when you're getting pressure up the middle immediately in your face, there's not a whole lot you can do. So trying to fix that with the Coleman Shelton we're hearing, or Bates, whichever one ends up playing there, or if they go get a Connor Williams. I think little moves like that are trying to help avoid them from having to deal with that immediate pressure in their face, because they're not the quarterbacks that are going to avoid that right away. They want to do more. They don't want to just toss the ball, throw the ball away, which some quarterbacks will. So that's one thing too that always sticks out to me too, is you have to at some point help your quarterback a little bit. And I feel like they have done that with Caleb. And so it is a good situation, at least for him coming in.
Yeah, and it's definitely with the rookie QB and a guy who you're kind of banking your future of your franchise on is, I think, one thing they're more focused on with Caleb than probably they were with Justin is just health. We saw Justin Fields. I don't know if did he ever play a full season. I don't think so. Caleb's going to get hit. He's going to get pressured, and I think you're absolutely right, Taylor. Their focus is to keep him healthy, no matter how they got to do it, whether it's going to be quick release or just him just getting rid of the ball and not taking that sack. But yeah, it's something the Bears, I think, are going to be heavily focused on in the offseason. You posted a powerful quote from Caleb on your Twitter page. It said, "When you look in the mirror and brush your teeth or say your affirmations, say this and that about yourself, whatever the case may be. When you hear your own voice, that you love that person mentally, physically, and emotionally." How do you think that quote from Caleb kind of defines him as a player more so than a person?
Yeah, I think that the whole thing, that was all from the Pivot. If no one's watched the Pivot episode with Caleb, go watch it, because it was fantastic. It was pre-draft, so he didn't know. There was a lot of little jokes about like, oh, Chicago, and then they'd all laugh because it was pretty much happening. Everybody at that point knew it was happening. But it's just, to me, like I said, it's so much self-awareness. And I think that I love that in a person in general, but especially on the football field. When you have a guy who, number one, somebody like this at 22 years old, who is already speaking this way, shows to me that he'll be able to come in this locker room and be able to, number one, be a leader, but also take credibility for things. And I think that in past times, we haven't had that in Chicago. There's been a lot of moments where the toxicity of maybe egos or certain things that, people wanted the offense run one way and other people wanted the offense ran another way, and things started to clash. I think that Caleb's the kind of guy that he knows what he feels is best for him and for the team, but he's also the person, and you mentioned it earlier, he said he doesn't like to run the ball. He was like, I want to get the ball to my receivers. Like, I want my weapons to be a part of this success. And those are just such big words to say, because it's easy to say, I'll do what I can to win, but it's not easy to say, I want to get everybody involved in this win, because this is a team sport and we're all in this together type of thing. So another part of that, because I had penned it on my Twitter because I loved it, but he said, that's the most important thing for yourself as a person, a human, throughout the chaotic thing we call life, enjoying and loving the man or woman or whoever is looking back. And I just think it's so important, that part to me, because he's confident, and some people may call it arrogance. To me, it's confidence, because he's just comfortable in the person he is. And because of that, he knows what he's good at. He knows what maybe he needs to work on. And that's some of the things that I think, again, former quarterbacks, former players, former offensive coordinators get stubborn. We can go back to Matt Nagy and the years of him and Mitchell Trubisky clashing, because Trubisky calls him out and was like, this offense isn't working. We've got to change it. And Matt Nagy was like, no, you're the problem. You're benched. And it just creates chaos. And that where I don't think we'll ever get that type of thing with Caleb, because Caleb's so comfortable with who he is. And I do think that I like Shane Waldron a lot too. I think the relationship between them will be fantastic, because we'll be able to actually have adult conversations about what is supposed to happen with the offense. And if something is not working, I think we can have rational conversations and compromises rather than just turning on each other like it's happened before. And it's not easy to find guys like that. There's a lot of egos in sports. There's a lot of, I'm the best at what I do, and sometimes that takes over from the team element of it. And every single thing I've heard about Caleb Williams is he's all about his teammates. And if you don't see that already, I mean, Keenan Allen's showing up to pro days and they're all practicing together. They're hanging out together already, and they haven't even played a snap together. And so you can already see that the leadership element of what he wants to do for the Bears. So to me, I love that quote. I loved just like you said, the person side of it, but also how that just can translate to the football field so well.
Yeah, and I do want to shout out to the chat, guys. We got 70 right now in the chat. Cliff, Ron, Cliff, seen you a lot. Appreciate it. Chicago Sports Podcast, Trax. Glad you were able to make it. We're all glad Trax is okay, guys. He did have an accident earlier today. I do want to get a little bit into, well, let's talk about, you just said a name that a lot of people are super, I don't know anything about the guy. A lot of Bears fans love to hire. How do you feel that Shane Waldron is different from the Bears offensive coordinators that we've seen over the last decade that really struggled to kind of, I don't know, like adapt to the players' skill sets more so than just running the scheme they run?
Yeah, and I think that was a big problem for a lot of times. Almost every quarterback, I feel like we've had glimpses where it almost feels like they start to figure out what's working and then they shy away from that. And I don't know if it's they're too timid to push, and sometimes some coaches get worried that if they do the same thing over and over again, people are going to figure it out. But sometimes that ends up being the good thing, because then when you can change it up, it is more of a surprise to people. When you have a guy like Justin Fields who needed a spy constantly, we should have been able to do way more. We shouldn't have, or last year when the Vikings blitzed the Bears like crazy and you didn't do anything, you didn't add an extra blocker, you didn't do anything else to try and help this offense at all. There was just certain things that they couldn't adapt to in game, and that was a massive problem. But Shane Waldron, this offense, and I tell people this constantly, is going to be so much more up tempo, more fun paced, more quirky, weird stuff sometimes where you're like, what's happening? You'll see 2 tight ends. You'll see 3 tight ends. You'll see 3 wide receivers at times. You'll see some of the wide receivers blocking, which all of this started pointing out to the moves they've made. They knew that when it comes to like a Khalil Herbert, he's not the best blocker. So they go and get a DeAndre Swift, who's a little bit better of a blocker. They go and get, obviously Mercedes Lewis coming back. He is somebody he's a blocking tight end. He can help you in that aspect. They go and get a guy like Keenan Allen, who is really good at a lot of things. He's one of the best route runners in the league, and he's just so smooth and finesse, but he can also help in the blocking game. And so they went and added all of these elements and pieces it's not guys who can do one thing on the offense. And I think that's one of the things that Shane Waldron does best, is use guys in so many multiple ways. We talk a ton about how he loves the 2 tight end sets. He does that a lot. And a lot of that turns into like RPO play action type stuff. He loves to use the multiple tight ends for that. And so it's just going to be fun. It's going to be so much more fun. There were just moments last year, or let's just say the last 5, 6, 7 years, where we were watching this offense and it felt slow. When you're on your 13th screen in a row and the defense is predicting everything you're about to do, it's miserable at certain points. And we all saw that, how when we watching a game on TV can tell you what is about to happen, the defensive coordinator probably knows what's about to happen. When you're lining up and shotgun on a 3rd and 2 on the 2-yard line about to score, and you line up shotgun, it's just weird things. And I don't know if Getsy tried to get too fancy. I joke about it. He was just trying to sabotage us coming from Green Bay, but it was boring. It was predictable. And I think a lot of it too is the predictability of it, because they didn't have a good enough offensive line to help with certain elements of what Luke Getzey wanted to do, it turned even to more of a disaster. If you have a better line, if you have 5 guys in front of your quarterback who can really just like maul guys, then yeah, you can be a little more predictable because guys aren't going to get through your line. But the problem is, you saw how quickly guys were getting straight through Cody Whitehair and Lucas Patrick. I mean, there was no chance. So I do think Shane Waldron adds this element of unpredictability, a little more of adding like kind of quirky fun stuff, but it fits Caleb perfectly because that's what Lincoln Riley does too, is they just kind of do some wonky stuff, but it ends up being fun and fast paced and up tempo, which I think will be fun to watch. Are there going to be moments of what is going on because it's an offense, now a rookie quarterback working with a new offensive coordinator, two new weapons, a rookie wide receiver, a lot of new elements in it. So there's probably going to be some rough patches, but I do not expect it to be slow and boring like we've seen the last 5+ years.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's the first time it feels like the Bears put the pieces in place prior to having, or put the system in place prior to having all the pieces. And then, you added Keenan Allen, a guy who can get yards after the catch, also a guy who's good at getting separation quickly. DeAndre Swift can catch the ball in the backfield. Gerald Everett's a big body target. It feels like they're just putting pieces there to make Caleb a little more comfortable. I do want to welcome in, guys, our co-host, Kyle, obviously my twin brother. Looks a lot like me. We figured that out. Kyle, how you doing tonight?
Good. How are you guys doing, man?
Good.
Good.
So, Taylor, obviously the title of this show was Top 3 Bears that will take the greatest step forward this season. I mean, you could talk about coaches too, because obviously Eberflus is probably on the hottest seat in Chicago, but who do you think takes the greatest leaps forward this season that was already on the roster prior to this year?
Yeah, so I did a podcast about this recently on Making Monsters, and we went around the Windy City Gridiron, the group that I do my podcast for, and we each named a person we thought, but then in my podcast, we went into depth and we each named 3 people. So there's multiple ways I could go with this. Like you just said, it just depends, like, who do you, in your mind, do you think will probably make the biggest impacts? Because you could go from the bottom and say that, well, there are certain guys that maybe like a Velus Jones, who any step is a big step because we need to see something out of Velus. A lot of people are really high, honestly, on how Velus could be in this new kickoff, and they say it benefits guys who have like a running back style, and Velus had that. He was obviously mainly a return guy in college. We saw him last year towards the end of the season. Bears started mixing him in the run game a little bit, so I do think it's something that he could benefit from. But this is his last chance, and here, at least in Chicago, and you would think that anything right now. So in that realm, you could go a Velus. To me, I think the biggest one for me was Javon Dexter. I was a big Javon Dexter fan when we drafted him, honestly. I obviously live here in Jacksonville, so I'm very close to Florida. The radio station I work at is the home of the Gators, so we have a lot of Gator content. We talk a lot of Florida Gators, and Javon Dexter was someone I talked about for like months before the draft, so I was really excited when we got him. I think that towards the end of the season, especially in the first 9 weeks, he only got to the quarterback 3 times. And the end of the season, he had like 9 QB hits, 2.5 sacks, I think it was, at the end of the season. He just was really able to start in creating pressure. And we talk about like the Sweat effect. A lot of it was Montez Sweat and the addition of him on that line and how it kind of just made everything better. But I just also saw Javon Dexter getting more and more comfortable and getting to the quarterback in general. And that was even when they were moving him around, because when Yannick Ngakoue went out, you were seeing Javon Dexter playing 3 tech, you were seeing him play 1, you were seeing him play true end. He was all over the line, and he was creating pressures from everywhere. The big question with him is, can he be that true 3 tech? Because it looks like right now the Bears want him to be. And so that's going to be one of the big things that I think we see. But I do believe that Javon Dexter is going to be someone by the end of this year. We're talking about him as one of our best defensive linemen. And so that's one that really popped out to me. Another one I think is Tyreek Stevenson. I didn't know a ton about Tyreek when we drafted him, but he was in Miami. He also went to Georgia, very close to home here. So I had a ton of people who followed Tyreek a little bit more. And same thing for him. A little bit of a slow start towards the end of the season. We knew coming out of college he was kind of handsy, and that was an issue. To where he got some penalties. We saw that he had 7 penalties this last season, but he was targeted a ton last season. I don't know if people realize, I want to say it was like 116 times he was targeted. The next closest corner on the team was like 65. Like that, they were going after Tyreek Stevenson last season, and rightfully so. You're not going to throw at Jalen Johnson. You're avoiding that. They don't really love throwing at Kyler Gordon. They saw how he could get his hands on things. But even with all of that, all of those targets, he was able to really settle into his place later in the season. And he's just someone that I personally truly believe that with Jalen, Kyler, and Tyreek, the Bears could have one of the best cornerback rooms in the league. If Tyreek takes that next step up and Javon continues kind of the path that Kyler continues the path that he's able to do. We were waiting for Jalen Johnson to start getting his hands on some of those balls and bring some in, and he was able to do that this last season. So it was really fun to see that. But those are two names for me that I really think about when taking that next leap and making an impact on this team almost immediately. And I know a few of the guys, which I agree with this. Darnell Wright is another one. I think that Darnell last year already was playing with one arm most of the season, and he was very banged up and was still manhandling guys like Max Crosby in games. And so I think that's another guy we can look forward to. I think we have our right tackle of the future with Darnell Wright, and he'll just continue to get better. So those are a few names that pop out to me when we're talking about that could possibly, and I think will take that big step.
I couldn't agree with you more. I'm glad you said that. The name I was hoping it was Tyreek Stevenson. I think is due for a breakout season. I didn't even realize it. Yeah, so you had a up close and personal look at Tyreek and at Javon because they both played in Florida. Yeah. Again, and this has surprised a lot of people when I say it. A person that I think might actually take a leap this year, and a lot of people disagree just because the targets will be spread so thin. But with rookie quarterbacks, I think Cole Kmet is another guy that people kind of sleep on because you hear DJ Moore, you hear Keenan Allen, they drafted Rome Odunze, but rookie quarterbacks feel really comfortable with throwing in the center of the field. Cole Kmet's done nothing but get better every season he's played. So I think Cole Kmet's a guy who might actually improve from the season he had last year. At least I'm hoping he does. Kyle, do you have any questions for Taylor?
Yeah, Taylor, you're talking about how you expect Javon Dexter and Zach Pickens and these second and third year players to leap forward and get better and start to learn their defense, the team, the scheme a little bit. Do you believe that even if those guys do make those leaps and the Bears pass rush gets a little better, do you still think they need to add somebody on the outside opposite Montez Sweat?
I do. I'm highly concerned about the edge position in general. I posted something the other day, I want to say yesterday, and it was like a chart of like pressure is when a team blitzes, a defense blitzes versus pressure is when a team doesn't blitz. The Bears were in the bottom left corner, which is not good. Like it was on the bottom axis on both sides. They weren't creating a ton of pressures. We knew that. We saw that last year. Even when Montez came, it was like not the numbers you still wanted to see, but it was more so we were satisfied with that because we were actually getting to the quarterback a little bit. But you have to. I mean, this league it's a passing league. You have to have guys that are coming at your quarterback from both sides. And I think that Montez Sweat does add a level to where you're kind of like, okay, this guy is able to create so much from one side, and what we're thinking Javon Dexter, if he's in the middle, what he can create there, I think can really help too. DeMarcus Walker, I don't love. I think that DeMarcus Walker is a guy who in Tennessee, and I've said this many times on my podcast, had 7 sacks in Tennessee. All 7 of those came from the interior. Not one came from the outside. He's that guy that is better at getting pass rush and getting to the quarterback from the inside, but he's also that guy who on the outside is creating chances for those sacks. So you're not seeing like 10, 11, 12 sacks from DeMarcus Walker, but the reason Montez got his is because DeMarcus Walker got to him quick and made him leave the pocket, and then Montez gets to him. Those numbers don't show up on stat sheets. So I do think that DeMarcus Walker doesn't get quite enough love as he should, because there are moments where he is that person that a quarterback is rolling away from and rolls into a sack. He's just not getting that sack number. I don't know. I think we need to see a ton more from Zach Pickens. I feel like we just didn't see nearly enough last year from Pickens of what we would need to. And I think that Austin Booker, I do think eventually he'll be able to be solid when it comes to that line, but I do think it's going to take a year or two for him. He's really raw. A lot of the people that I've talked to just said he's going to take a little bit of time to really ease into the NFL, but give him a couple years and he'll be there, and we could possibly be talking about an edge guy that you drafted that is going to be successful. But you can't bank on that. You can't bank on a guy who's better at sacks on the interior and a rookie who's going to take a couple years and not have any backup plan. But with all that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if they just roll through camp with these two guys. I personally am not a big Yannick Ngakoue fan. I know a lot of people like Jan. I just think that he's not good at all at setting the edge, can't stop the run. I would rather have a guy out there that can do both and maybe isn't at the level of a pass rusher, but is able to stop the run and get to the quarterback and create some pressures over a guy who literally is just a pass rusher and can't do the other. But I get people wanting to bring somebody in to try and help with that position. I just think that they're going to kind of play it through camp, see how these first 5-6 weeks go. If they drastically need help, they make a splash move like they did with Montez last year. We know that was that trade deadline that everyone was shocked by that one. The trade deadline trade with Montez, and then maybe doing something like that if they get to week 8 and it's it's still a concern. But if they feel like they're getting enough from DeMarcus Walker and Montez Sweat and Austin Booker mixing in, and Javon Dexter takes a sleep and is getting interior pass rush, maybe they don't feel like they're rushed to do it.
Is there any free agents out there you can think of that you'd like to see the Bears bring in?
Yeah, and I don't know. I've heard a lot of people talking about maybe like a Bud Dupree. I don't know if he's still available. That was a name I heard. Somebody from Miami. I can't remember. I can't think of the guy's name right now. I'll think of it in a second. But there was another guy I want to say from Miami that is another edge guy that is one of the better. He's better at stopping the run. He's not the biggest sack getter, so he'll get you 3, 4, 5, but he's really good at stopping the run. And so you can have conversations about someone like that. But right now, I just don't think there's anybody worth going to spend money on. If somebody will come here for a little bit of a deal and, kind of ride it out a little bit, but I just don't want to waste money on a guy who's going to get you 2 sacks.
Mm-hmm. What about somebody like Justin Houston?
Oh, yeah. Is he a free agent?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think someone like that could add an element. Again, I would even for that want it to be a manageable deal. I'm not sure I'd want to go spend money on that right now. I know the Bears still have some money to spend, but I think they'll want to just kind of play out the camp a little bit and see really what is going on. Yes, Agba is who I was thinking of. But I think they'll want to play it out and just see really what it looks like, how ready Austin Booker is, how when you give DeMarcus Walker that chance to be the guy, can he be that guy? Because one of the things last year too, when Jan got hurt and they were mixing up the line a ton, DeMarcus Walker's numbers did get better. His pressures went up, his sack number went up. Obviously, he was having more play time. You saw him a little bit more. Like I said, they'd move Dexter out there sometimes and DeMarcus on the inside. So it got to move that. And Eberflus loves those rotations. So I could see them maybe making an affordable move, but if it's not affordable, I think they're just going to ride it out through camp, and then maybe mid-season, if they're still looking, they'll hit the panic button.
Taylor, I'm going to get a lot of trouble for saying this, but I am a big fan. Like I feel like everybody kind of has a second team in the NFL. I am a big fan of the Jacksonville Jaguars. That is the team that I root for when I'm not watching the Bears, to be honest with you.
He always has been.
I love Clemson players. I love Christian Wilkins. I love Trevor Lawrence. Do you think there's any similarities in regards to like pocket passing presence, the pocket awareness between Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I obviously covering the Jaguars. It's been an adventure watching the years of Trevor so far, and kind of some of the critiques and what to defend, and what I always say the phrase, like, there's a difference between excuses and reasons. And sometimes that line is blurred because it's easy to name all of these things of what went wrong and be like, well, all of these million things went wrong, and that's why they weren't, playing as high a level as they are. And some of those are excuses and some are reasons. But one thing about Trevor, and this is when I talked about that pressure to sack rate earlier, Trevor has always been really, really good when it comes to that. That number's always been really low back in Clemson. Even the first 2 years here in Jacksonville, I want to say it was like in the 5 to 10 range of pressure to sack rate. This last season, it spiked massively, and some of that is the offensive line. Some of that is, I think Trevor was starting to panic in certain situations because Calvin Ridley had no idea where he was half the time. He was running the wrong routes. Trevor was getting frustrated. Christian Kirk went down, so we didn't have Kirk for the whole end of the season. Zay Jones was hurt for most of the season, so Trevor was just having to do so much that I think the defenses realized that, and the offense was becoming so predictable that they were able to get to him a little quicker. But when it comes to Trevor previous years and the way he does have that the awareness in the pocket and the pocket presence, I do think there's some similarities there. I do think their games are pretty different though. When you watch what Trevor does, Trevor has like a fantastic arm. He has an arm. He can launch it down the field if you want to. He also struggles with the mid-range for some reason. It's like his weakest point is just in that like 19 to 25 yard range. Maybe that's just because he had Christian Kirk up front and then would launch the ball down to Calvin Ridley, and there was really nothing in between there. To me, Caleb is just more of those guys who can obviously hit every level of the field, but he also does a little bit, and this is Lincoln Riley's offense, but he's a little more creative and does the quirky stuff. So he's like somewhere between, I know a lot of people say Patrick Mahomes. To me, it's more Aaron Rodgers-esque, and I know we hate that name. It's terrible. But that's also who he said he modeled his game after. That was his idol. That's the quarterback he loved. And you see a lot of Aaron Rodgers and Caleb Williams' game, not so much of the wanting to scramble and do crazy things, but if you give him the opportunity, he's going to run 15 yards on you. And that's the type of quarterback that I see. And I guess you can see some glimpses in that with Trevor, but to me, Trevor's more I want to say even, I'm trying to think of a quarterback more to think. You see glimpses of like a Josh Allen at times, but like a Joe Burrow at times. He's like a mixture between those two almost. Like he has this arm where he can launch it, but he'll also drill people with his shoulder sometimes. That leads to turnovers and some of those things. So it's interesting because they do have similarities, but certain aspects are very different.
Yeah, actually,
that's
it's
well said.
Go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that's well said. It also seemed like Trevor Lawrence was playing kind of on one leg last year. It seemed like he was hurt for a big chunk of the year. I don't know how much they talked about or how much he was actually hurt, but he was hobbling a lot.
He probably in the last like month, like let's say from December to the end of the season, practiced 5 times. Like it was like shoulder, it was ankle, it was concussion, it was one thing after another. So that's one thing we kind of realized too, is Trevor is not at the level yet to where he can't practice. There are some quarterbacks that probably can. Patrick Mahomes probably does not have to practice much with this team because they already have this cohesiveness and he just kind of is at that level already. You hear Tom Brady's and Aaron Rodgers and the bigger name quarterbacks who are veterans don't have to practice every day. We realized quickly that was not quite Trevor Lawrence yet, but it was a lot of injuries. When you see his numbers, just compare his numbers between, that first 8-9 weeks to the end of the season, and it drastically different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say he's a tough guy though. He, to be honest, obviously not the same build, but he reminds me of Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, the guy keeps getting hit and he just keeps getting back up and playing ball. And like I love the style in which he plays. That he's got a lot of grit. He's a pocket passer, but when he needs to, he'll get out of the pocket and he'll take a lick. But yeah, obviously, like you said, Calvin didn't really do what we kind of expected he would do there. Kirk was injured. I think Evan Ingram was like top 5 in the league in targets. And he's, when your tight end's that high in targets, it's probably not the best thing for your team.
I don't watch every Jaguars game, but I feel like they missed 9 or 10 passing touchdowns last year by like that. I mean, I feel like every game there was some guy who couldn't get both feet in the back of the end zone, or somebody who was just past the outstretched arms. Calvin Ridley, they were so close on numerous times.
I read a stat today actually on our show that the Jags had the most touchdowns called back by pass interferences, which is 4. The next closest team had 2. They also had a league high of batted balls in the end zone. Like whatever was happening. So there's different scenarios. You can look at that different ways because some of that was probably on Trevor, putting the ball places he shouldn't have been on. Some of that's receivers not in the right spot. Some of that's really good defensive back play, but it was a good chunk of plays that were either taken back or just barely knocked away, or a toe was out of the end zone, or the receiver dropped the ball. A lot of those situations last season.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing, I love ETN. He was on my fantasy team, and I swear to God, that guy had to have the most runs from the 1 yard line that did not get in the end zone. I mean, I was like, I'm watching him, and I'm like, okay, we get 6 points right here for fantasy. and it's like 3 1-yard runs and just stuffed at the line every time. I was like, man, the Jaguars got to.
It was probably him one and Justin Fields too.
Yeah.
I love each one, but the Jaguars got to go get themselves like a big-bodied running back. They could have used that last year. Taylor, just for we've got over 100 in the chat now. Just for the audience and everybody listening tonight, we do appreciate your time. Where can people find Taylor Dow at?
Yeah, so my Twitter is at Taydal1010XL. Very active on there. Like I said, I cover the Jags and I also cover the Bears. So there you'll see a little mixture of both if you follow me on Twitter, a little sprinkled in of everything. But yeah, follow me on there. I also, through Windy City Gridiron is where my podcasts go on. It's called Making Monsters. So you can find those on YouTube, Spotify, all of the places you find your podcast. Just search for Windy City Gridiron and Making Monsters or Second City Gridiron on YouTube. And so a ton of stuff. I have my series going on right now. We just talked about the players we think will take the biggest step. We've had 3 episodes though. That was the first episode. The second episode, which was which player, I'm trying to think of the order of them now. So we had the biggest step. We had has the most to prove, which bear has the most to prove. And then I just did one that dropped today about which non-star do we think playing well will make the biggest impact on the Bears this year. So it's been really fun to do that because it's been like an in-depth look at the roster and maybe some of the names, because we've talked a ton about Caleb and we've talked a ton about DJ and Keenan and Rome, but some of these other guys that maybe we don't talk much about, like a Roshan Johnson, where's his place in the offense this season, and some of the Jaquan Brisker and some of these other guys that maybe we haven't quite seen enough from that we want to know more about. So it's fun. It's just a kind of fun off-season thing that we've been doing.
Yeah, very cool. It all sounds super interesting. And after tonight, Taylor, I will be following you on Twitter. I'm absolutely going to check out both podcasts because, like I said, don't hate me, everybody, but I as much as I love the Bears, I really love the Jaguars as well, because how many seasons have the Bears been out pretty early and often? So that's the team I kind of jump onto.
Well, you picked the wrong one because
I was going to say the Jaguars are right there with.
One more question: Are you going to London?
No, I wish. And I was like so upset because I was planning to go to Chicago for that game, and I was like, this is perfect because I can watch the Jags. Like, I know a large group of Jags people will go up there. All of my coworkers would have gone to Chicago. And then it also would have been my Bears people and my family that live up there. And so I was pumped. And then whenever they announced January, February, when they announced like the Bears are in London, I was like, dang it. I was like, they're going to end up having the Jags and Bears in London. And I was like, I just can't do that. It just, for me, it's more of timing. I could probably make it work, but I've also never been over there. So if I wanted to go, if I went, I would want to make like a week of it, not go for 3 days, you know? Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm super bummed because I was really excited about that one. The game's always a little extra stressful for me because everybody here in Jacksonville just gives me the hardest time if the Bears lose. So it's always a little extra hard on me.
Well, hopefully this year's the year. I think Caleb might change things. So Taylor, I do want to thank you for the time that you share with us tonight. We really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sticking around through whatever happened when the show started earlier. Like I said, I had a little bit of an emergency. We appreciate you hanging out. And yeah, guys, go check out Taylor Dow. Taydal, is it on Twitter?
Yes. So at Taydal1010XL.
Okay. Go check her out, guys. Watch Making Monsters, the podcast. We're all Bears here. But if you do have a passion for the Jacksonville Jaguars, like I do as well, go check that out as well. It's Helmets and Heels, right?
Yes, Helmets and Heels.
Okay.
Or if you just love some like former Bears, they have Travis Gibson, they have Roy Robertson Harris. They have some former Bears now, so you can follow along. Yeah,
that's right. Robertson Harris actually had a pretty impactful season for them.
Yeah.
Taylor, we do appreciate you for your time tonight. Have a happy and blessed 4th of July. Be safe, obviously. And you'll end up in London soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I hope so.
To be there home away from home.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Taylor.
All right, bye.
Taylor Dow, guys, that was pretty awesome. Super, super insightful. I mean, honestly, she knows her stuff, man. The people that she's worked with, the people she's talked to, especially regarding Caleb Williams before he was even drafted. I mean, Kyle, you weren't here earlier. She was talking about the velocity, which the miles per hour, the difference in miles per hour, which Caleb can throw the ball at. I mean, that is something I have literally never even heard about, Caleb. I've watched the guy for 2 years. I've never heard anybody say a word about the velocity. Really cool stuff. She obviously was able to give us a little bit of insight about Caleb's early years of football, his high school days, stuff like that.
I also like her comparison, man. I mean, I've said it on this show numerous times. It's really not fair to compare Caleb Williams to Patrick Mahomes, but he does have this very similar playing style of Aaron Rodgers. They once they get out that crease, Aaron Rodgers is probably the most dangerous quarterback in the NFL if he can slip through between the tackle and the guard. And Caleb Williams did that time and time again in college, and he's going to do it here in the NFL too.
Yeah, I am going to be checking out both of her podcasts because I mean she's great. Honestly, I was really, really, really blessed to have her on here, guys. Especially over a holiday weekend, she was able to share her time with us. And I also want to thank everybody who's in the chat tonight, guys. Like I said, over 100. Cliff, Swifty, Ant Moss, as always. Ron D. Burns. Obviously Chicago Sports Podcast, Tracks himself. I want to thank Kyle for joining us here. Kyle, let's get a little bit into obviously the subject, which is this episode. 3 players in which, and she chose 3 great players. And Bayless Jones isn't somebody I would have even thought about, but with the new kickoff rule, she's right. I mean, if that guy makes any bit of leap, it's a big leap, right? Because he's been useless.
After one of the practices, Matt Eberflus talked about how Bayless Jones is a very dangerous player. If he gets in open space, he's heavy, he's strong, he's fast, and
we know the speed is something you hate to move on from a guy who's a tenth of a second behind Tyreek Hill in a 40. You know what I mean? It's just the guy never really had a place, but now.
Yeah, from the way he was talking about him, and after that in that interview after practice, it sounds like I mean, obviously they can't go on there and start talking down about their players, but it sounded like they plan on keeping them around for a little bit longer.
Guys, I'm going to give a quick shout out to a couple of our sponsors. Bridges Scoreboard in Northwest Indiana, Chicago Sports Headquarters with Hall of Fame menu and the coldest beer in Chicagoland. And River Street might have something to say about that coldest beer thing. I also give a shout out to River Street Tavern located at 102 River Street in East Dundee. You can obviously find our guy Kyle there, Tendon Bar, and they have really great specials, guys. Specials you're not going to find at a McDonald's. Half-price burgers, I think, on Wednesday, or $2 burgers, on Wednesdays, right? Mm-hmm. And then half-price wings on Sunday, guys. Go check them out. The food is good. The environment's really good, guys. Big sports bar. They're going to have every game you want to watch on one of their TVs. Everybody there, the whole crowd loves sports. Kyle's obviously going to have the most important game on because bartender knows sports himself. That's always a benefit in a sports bar, right? TC's World of Wonders is your headquarter and all your Dream Chicago sports jerseys and memorabilia. Check out Tom's line of gear and collectibles. Guys, if you're looking for jerseys, I know Caleb Williams' jersey's been really hard to get, I think, for people in the last few months, which is awesome, right? The Bears' new quarterback is selling out, so that's cool. Go to TC's World of Wonders for jerseys. I think they also do hats. They do a lot of apparel, guys, for sports. Go check them out. And then Serendipity Ice Cream Parlor. If you do find yourself a Bridges Scoreboard, get some dinner, get some wings, get a cold beer when you're finished. If you still want to cool off because it's still 89 degrees outside or something, step into Serendipity Ice Cream Parlor today and discover what delicious summertime tastes like. Serendipity is serving up heaven, and they recommend their delectable funnel cake sundae, guys. So go and check out River Street, check out Bridges, check out Serendipity, depending on where you live or where you're at, guys. So Kyle, 3 players that you think, and she named the guy, Javon Dexter and Tyreek Stevenson were the 2 names that immediately come to my mind as well. Like I said, she obviously knows Bears in and out. Who are 3 players outside of those guys that you think people could expect to see take at least a small leap forward or a little bit of an improvement from last season, or even rookies? Let's say a guy who's listed currently as second place on the depth chart, right? A guy who might win a job over a player who's already starting on the Bears roster.
Well, one guy for sure she mentioned is Darnell Wright. I mean, obviously Darnell Wright had a good year last year, but he was a little banged up. It's offensive tackle is a very tough transition in the NFL. It's everybody plays bigger, stronger, faster. The game's faster. I think I'd like to see it could really helpful for the Bears if Darnell Wright is not only an all pro tackle, but maybe one of the best tackles in the NFL. I mean, the Bears offensive line has been a constant problem for them going for far back as basically we can remember. You know, if they do have trouble with Nate Davis again and he's not playing up to par, up to the contract they signed him to, or if for some reason those two centers that they signed can't seem to fill that role, hopefully Darnell Wright can pick up a little bit of the slack. You know, you're only as good as your worst player, but it seems like sometimes when you have those guys like Trent Williams and those guys in the NFL who are above and beyond everybody else, or even a guy like Kelsey and the Eagles, they seem to kind of pick up the slack and they can almost hide or mimic some of their deficiencies. Another guy I'd really like to see take a step forward is Tyler Scott. You know, obviously we got Shane Waldron from Seattle. He had the luxury of having Jackson Smith and Jigma, and Tyler Lockett, both guys who can take the top off the defense. You know, I like Ruma Dunze a lot. I like Keenan Allen a lot. I like DJ Moore a lot. I think they can all take the top off the defense, but Tyler Scott could be a weapon purely based off speed if he can somehow manage to make this team. I'd like to see him kind of fill that Tyler Lockett role. You know, when he was drafted last year, everybody was talking highly about him. Everybody was saying it was a great pick for the Bears. It was a steal even in the 5th round. And he never really came into his own last year. But I mean, how much can we take off last year with Luke Getsy, Justin Fields, and just how bad that offense was? You know, Justin Fields, I think, threw for 2,600 yards. So it's not like everybody in the Bears receiving core looked good last year. I'd really like to see him take a step forward and to kind of be that number 4 receiver, even a number 3 where they're trying to just bomb the ball downfield. And then the last guy for me in particular, I think would be Zach Pickens. And obviously, you know, Taylor talked about it, but there's just so much mystery around Zach Pickens. He's such a big question mark. You know, he's got the intangibles. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, but they talked about in college that he never really lived up to be the guy that they wanted him to be. Obviously, Ryan Post took a chance on him in the 3rd round, but he didn't play particularly well last year. When he did play, he wasn't given much opportunity. And the reason he wasn't given much opportunity is because I think he wasn't playing as well as they wanted him to. So if he could come in this season and play kind of that 1 or 3 technique role, or go switch back and forth, kind of be moved around, maybe be a good backup to Andrew Billings. I think this defensive line is better than people think. I do think they still need to eventually add a defensive end at some point, even if it's not somebody with a bunch of star power, but a big name. But I mean, at some point, Montez Sweat's going to have to get some help, or they're just going to keep double teaming him. And if he gets hurt, the Bears are in big trouble.
Yeah, Tyler Scott's a good name. It's an interesting one because, you know, the Bears are stacked at receiver. It's going to be hard to make this team as a receiver. Velus Jones is probably going to make the team just strictly because they drafted him to return kicks, and now it's relevant. But Tyler Scott has a skill set that none of the Bears receivers have. I mean, it's kind of weird to hear because they have 3 phenomenal receivers. I think Adunze is going to be a number 1 in the NFL eventually. Maybe not this season because, like I said, the targets will be spread thin. But Tyler Scott does something that none of the Bears receivers do, and that's just like you said. The guy just runs fast. He's pure speed,
Especially in a straight line.
So is Velus Jones, but Velus Jones we know struggles to kind of wrap his head around the game of football itself and offensive schemes in particular. And I don't know that he was ever running the correct route when he was on the field, even the plays where he caught the ball. But Tyler Scott knows the game of football. He was on that Cincinnati team. He had really a great tenure at Cincinnati. I do think that he's still a contributor on this team. A guy that he's been in the NFL and he wasn't on the Bears last year. A guy that I think is going to make a giant leap forward, I should say, based on the players around him with, as Taylor mentioned, Kyler Gordon, Tyreek Stevenson, Jalen Johnson, is Kevin Byard is a guy that I think, you know, he was an all-pro player once. He had a really rough year last season. He did on a terrible Philadelphia Eagles secondary, which I saw Pro Football Focus ranked higher than the Bears today. Kind of blew my mind a little bit. But I think Kevin Byard's surrounded by players that can help him kind of fill a role, but then improve on that as the season goes on, because he's going to be learning Eberflus's defense, and there's some really talented players around him that can kind of help him along the way. But I think he's somebody who you're going to start to hear a lot of. I think you're going to hear the name a lot during the season. I think he's going to make a difference on this team. And I'm sorry to say, guys, I loved him as much as the rest of us did, but I questioned Eddie Jackson's effort towards the end of his tenure with the Bears. I really did. I don't think that
Realistically, the second he signed that contract, his effort, he just did not seem to want to tackle anybody anymore. And that's what a lot of these guys do, unfortunately, is they make their money and then they start making business decisions.
Yeah, no, it wasn't last year either. It was 2022. He looked out of shape, right? I mean, he just didn't look like he was spending his off season working very hard. I don't know. I could be wrong, but he looked like he added some weight, but not in a good way, and he slowed down a little bit. And I think Bayard's an improvement, even if Bayard did have a season, not super impressive season last year. I think once he plugs into this Bears defense and gets comfortable, he's a guy, like I said. I think the Bears signed him to 1 year, right? Was it, or a 2-year deal?
I believe 2 year, yeah.
Yeah, and I think they end up keeping him around. I like Bayard. He's a big body. Um, he's him and Brisker kind of play similar roles, but I do think he makes an impact on a defense that desperately needed a free safety.
2 year, $15 million.
And then a guy, like I said, guys, and I keep catching grief for this, but I believe I forget what the statistic was. Rookie quarterbacks targeted tight ends over 8 weeks 80 times. Over 8 weeks, rookie quarterbacks targeted tight ends 80 times. And I don't think, a lot of people think that the addition of Gerald Everett will take something away from Cole Kmet. I don't believe that. I think Cole Kmet's going to remain on the field almost every down. I think when the plays that Gerald Everett's on the field, Cole Kmet's going to be there as well. I don't think Everett's going to replace Kmet a whole lot.
Well, especially under Shane Waldron, who loves those 3 tight end sets. I mean, these all 3 of their tight ends, even including the OG himself, the guy who was catching passes from Garrard on the Jaguars 20 years ago. All 3 of them will be on the field quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that Cole Kmet, and call me crazy, I think Cole Kmet's statistics improve. I really do. I think that he improves as a player. I think that Caleb Williams is going to look to him early and often. I think when you got a guy that size who can run the way he does, I would like to see a little more strength on it. He's a big guy. I'd like to see him, break a few more tackles this season. But I do think Cole Kmet's going to have a really big impact on this offense, even with the receiving core that they have. In regards to that, Kyle, the Bears have obviously been a really strong running team really through their existence, but for the last few years, while Eberflus was the head coach of the team, they did add a bunch of firepower. They added Everett, they added Rome Odunze, they added Keenan Allen. How much do you think the Bears in the Shane Waldron offense, which lacked a little bit of, I don't think they finished the Seattle offense. I don't think even with Walker finished anywhere near the top in regards to rushing yards per game. How much do you think that Shane Waldron's going to depend on the run through Caleb's rookie year?
I'm glad you brought that up, because another player I wanted to talk about, which Taylor touched on, was Roschon Johnson. But I mean, I think it's at this point, it's really out of Shane Waldron's hands. I think the Bears have to run the ball a lot, right? I mean, you got a rookie quarterback coming in. You play in a tough division, a black and blue division, where they beat the hell out of each other. I mean, you want to take some pressure off Caleb Williams' shoulders. You need to run the ball. The goal for the Bears for the first 6-7 weeks of the season, while Caleb continues to develop and learn the system, should be to keep games close. Just try to keep games as close as possible. And the best way to do that is to run the football. I mean, you take time off the clock, you win the game, the game of possession, time of possession, you have a good chance of winning the game. And we both know that the Bears defense is better than they were last year, and they're going to keep the Bears in games. But you definitely don't want to be having Caleb Williams coming out and throwing 50 passes a game in his first 3 weeks of the season, right? I mean, you'd like to avoid shootouts at all costs. And I really do believe that Roschon Johnson's actually going to end up being a very, 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 very big weapon and player for the Bears this season. I think that I hate to say it, but I expect DeAndre Swift to miss some time. He's done it almost every single year of his career. And I think Roschon Johnson was still learning the position of running back. We all know that he only played 2 years of running back in college. He was a quarterback before that. Not only that, but when he was at Texas, he was playing behind Bijan Robinson, the best running back in the world at the time in college football. So he didn't really get that much playing time. I think Roshan Johnson trained a lot this offseason. He looks like a different player. He's definitely putting in the work, and I think he's going to be a huge key factor for the Chicago Bears this season. I wouldn't be surprised at all if all the guys we've talked about who we need to see leaps from in their second year, guys like Tyler Scott, Zach Pickens, Trevon Dexter, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Roshan Johnson's name is the one we hear the most.
Do you think that so let me ask you this, is there a rookie on this team that you think takes the leap? Because there's a lot of players, Rome Odunze, let's exclude Rome Odunze, Caleb Williams. Like when it comes to these guys that are there for depth, like Kieran and Austin Booker, they're often referred to as project players. Do you think there's a guy who ends up being ahead of the development?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the easy and predictable answer would be Tory Taylor, but I mean, I really do think Taylor is going to come in and look like a seasoned veteran. I mean, obviously it's tough. I think a lot of football fans find it hard to really tell if punters are struggling or what they're picking up, what they're getting better at, what they're doing, their skill set, because it's just not, nobody watches football to watch the punter. But I think Tory Taylor is gonna be a huge factor for the Chicago Bears this season, and I think that's why they drafted a punter in the fourth round. I think they fully expect him to come in here and punt like Brad Maynard did when he was at his best. Another guy I would keep my eye on, like Taylor said, is obviously Austin Booker. I mean, if the Bears don't go and add a defensive end before the training camp starts or even before the season starts, they're going to rely heavily on their what we call role players, right? I mean, DeMarcus Walker is not a starting defensive end in the NFL. He's not going to be a star. He's not going to get you 16, 17 sacks, but he's a role player and they can move him in, they can move him out. But realistically, if they don't add somebody else, and I do agree with what Cliff said down there, I do think the Bears probably are focusing more on the 2025 draft to add that defensive end, that stud, that star. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Austin Booker plays a lot more than we all think he's going to. I mean, the Bears' defensive line depth is not very deep right now, and they really didn't. If anything, they just lost guys on the defensive line in the offseason. So Austin Booker may have to come in here and play a big role for them. And I'd like to see, we're not expecting him to come in here and get 15 sacks, but I'd like to see him kind of do what Trevon Dexter did last year and start. If he starts and it's his beginning's a little rough and he's not picking up the defense well, at least by the end of the season, we'll see. Hopefully, we'll see 3 or 4 or 5 sacks.
Yeah, guys, I do want to. So we don't want to put too much stock into speculation, right? But there's 2 players that were undrafted, 2 rookies undrafted on this Bears team that I think you're gonna see a little more than you expect. Well, no, not see. One is Keith Randolph from Illinois. I do think he ends up playing some quality minutes on this team because, like you said, Kyle, like we all know, they're a little thin on the defensive line, regardless of just how talented the players are. They also need some depth, right? They need some guys to fill some minutes.
Well, that's a really good point because even the depth that they have right now, we saw they added these guys in the offseason. These guys, these names you've barely ever even heard of, and I don't think these guys are going to be here for that. I think if anything, you'd rather keep a guy around like Keith Randolph, basically solely based off his potential, right? I mean, it's you never know. At some point, the guy could end up being a star. We already know these guys, these veterans, they signed in the offseason, these backup defensive ends, backup defensive tackles. We know who they are. They've been in the NFL for years now. We know that they're not stars. I think you make a very good point. I think Keith Randolph can end up getting quite a few minutes for this team.
Another guy that I'm going to mention, and I trust me, guys. I know we don't want this guy on the field. I don't want to see him. You don't want to see him. He was undrafted. He played in Southern Illinois, and I believe he has the ability because we have the Hall of Fame game where we're probably not going to see Caleb Williams. I think there's a player that has the ability to take the second string quarterback job, and his name is Austin Reed, and he's a really good player, guys. He is. I don't know. I don't know that he's, an NFL quarterback. Obviously, that's the biggest question in the NFL. But the guy is probably the best quarterback that went undrafted, and this in 2024. And I know the Packers are real high on the kid they took out of I forget where. But Austin Reed is a quality football player, and if he gets time to sit on the bench and develop a little bit, he might end up getting signed by somebody to play quarterback. I don't know. But yeah, that's like the Tyson Bagent Austin Reed competition is going to be interesting to me. I think there's going to be I think there's going to be a little bit of a battle there. It's going to be fun to watch because Caleb's going to play probably more preseason ball than Justin Fields ever did because the Bears realized the way they approached the preseason didn't work out for him very well. but I do expect to see a whole lot of these other quarterbacks. And Brett Ripon, I don't know that he's gonna. I don't know what the hell the Bears are doing with him. I don't really want to see him. I don't want him to play too much. Like I like to see these young guys play, but I do think Austin Reed is a better player than Tyson Bagent. And let's be honest, guys, as Bears fans, we've watched backup quarterbacks play some quality time for this team for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's another name I would keep my ears open for. I do think he ends up being listed as the Bears quarterback 2 by the time the season starts.
Another guy that we haven't really talked much about is Ian Wheeler, who the Bears have already signed to a 3-year
I think
contract.
it was Cliff, or maybe Trax. Somebody mentioned Ian Wheeler in the comments earlier because we were talking about Bayless Jones. I don't know that I'd rather see Ian Wheeler than Bayless Jones returning kicks, but yeah, right here.
Well, I mean, as it stands right now, the Bears already extended Ian Wheeler for 3-year contract. They've already signed him to a 3-year contract. So, as it stands right now, he is actually under contract longer than Bayless Jones is for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, Keith Randolph also received a contract. The Bears Brian Poles has been busy. A lot of these guys who they signed after the draft are actually getting signed to the team, and you have to imagine that they have some sort of hope that these guys are going to make the roster if they're giving them contracts, right?
Well, yeah, and obviously we've talked about this before, but Ian Wheeler has a lot of nothing but good things said about him from all of his old coaches, his old teammates. It seems like he's created himself quite the reputation, and he's obviously just solely a return specialist. That's why the Bears brought him in. That's why the Bears signed him. But I'm excited to see what he can do. They say he's one of the fastest guys in the NFL now, and he's also very elusive. So it'd be nice to have kind of a Devin Hester-esque player back there. So it'd be fitting since Devin's obviously going to the Hall of Fame.
I think I'm excited to see Bayless Jones this year returning kicks. I really am. I think, he's obviously not very reliable. He hasn't got his head wrapped around the game. I don't think that the Bears coaching staff are super happy with him, but I do think that they see potential in the one thing that he can do. And I think returning kicks is when he's got the ball in his hands, man, when he actually has the ball in his hands, which has been like probably count on 2 hands, but when he's got the ball in his hands, he is a player that he's elusive, he's fast, he makes players miss. He's a guy that I would like to see involved in this.
I agree. I mean, I was a little shocked that the Bears didn't use Bayless Jones in like end arounds last year. It was kind of like a scat back or direct snap because, like you said, the few times that they did do that in his rookie season and his second year, he scored touchdowns, right? I mean, I think he has like 8 or 9 rushes in the NFL, just a handful of rushes in the NFL, and 2 of them turned into touchdowns. I think the only problem with Bayless Jones is you just can't throw him the ball because he can't catch it.
Guys, Dante asked a really, really interesting question, and it's something that most Bears fans, most football fans aren't aware of. Should Richard Hightower, the special teams coach of the Bears, be ahead of the curve since he's one of the architects of the kickoff rule? I have heard this. Hightower was part of this process, I guess, for this new kickoff rule, and I would hope, Dante, that you're 100% correct. I hope that he's already got some tools up his sleeve, right? I mean, I would think that he's because they're going to work really hard on this during the off season. It's going to be something that they're probably going to work on kickoffs a lot more than they have in the last few years during the off season. But I think Hightower probably has this. I don't know what word to use. He's probably got a scheme for this, a way to make returns a little more prominent. And obviously, Bayless Jones will be a part of that. But I think you're right, Dante. It's a good question. I think Richard Hightower has probably definitely a little more knowledge about how to utilize this kickoff more than most special teams coaches in the NFL.
Well, he's certainly got the weapons. I mean, first of all, they just drafted Tory Taylor, I believe the only punter, or maybe definitely the first punter drafted in the NFL draft. Definitely the most highly touted punter coming out of college. They now have Dante Pettis, Rome Odunze, Ian Wheeler, and Bayless Jones in the return game. I mean, they have the weapons.
Rome Odunze's been taking punt returns in practice, right?
Well, he
But I
did
mean,
it in college, and he scored a couple touchdowns doing it. Rome Odunze's another guy who's great in open space. I wouldn't be putting him there too much because you don't want to risk the injury, and you'd rather have him. He's more important to you as wide receiver. But I mean, he has a plethora of options. The Bears' special teams should be. They were getting better last year as the year went on, and they should be even better this year.
so who do you think? I mean, let's exclude Caleb because he's the quarterback. It's like Rome Odunze is going to be. It's going to be interesting to watch how the Bears use Rome Odunze. But do you think Rome Odunze, Torrey Taylor, who do you think impacts the Bears the most this year in their rookie season?
Well, I mean, I think it has to be Torrey Taylor, right? I mean, it's going to be just purely based off of opportunity. I mean, he is the Bears starting punter. I don't believe they have another punter on the team. They probably won't once the season begins, or maybe a guy in the practice squad. But Torrey Taylor is going to play. It's not a question of if or when. He's going to play. He's their punter, and he's going to be on the field for them. I think Roma Dunze will have an impact for the Chicago Bears 100%. But I think they're gonna have to ease him into it. First of all, it's much tougher to learn an NFL offense than it is to punt the ball. Right? We all know that. Second of all, he's playing behind DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Cole Kmet. So I mean, it's going to be tough for him to get the targets. Like Sean and I have talked about on the podcast here. I fully expect Roma Dunze to have a very similar season to Jackson Smith and Jigma, which was obviously under the same coach and Shane Waldron. About 750 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. That's what I expect from him.
Majority of it late in the season too.
Yeah, like the more he learns, the more they can open up the playbook with him on the field. The more plays he learns, the more of an impact he'll make. And I do expect at some point. I know people hate me when I say this, but I do expect at some point for Keenan Allen to miss some time. He's done it almost every year of his career.
I hate you for
I,
saying that.
I think at some point he's going to miss some time, and Roma Dunze is going to have to step up and fill those shoes. That number two or number even. I mean, Keenan Allen can be considered number one receiver in the NFL. He has been for the last 10 years.
So let's dive a little. We're sorry guys, we're just flowing here. We're talking about rookies and the impact they might have. I want to dive a little bit into fantasy football. I read something today that says Caleb Williams should absolutely be drafted in the higher rounds of fantasy football. Do you think that Caleb Williams is immediately a quality fantasy quarterback?
I wouldn't bank on Caleb Williams being my starting quarterback in fantasy, but I wouldn't be upset to have Caleb Williams in my bench. I think Caleb Williams is more than capable of having a CJ Stroud-like season. And I think CJ Stroud had huge weeks for fantasy football players last year. I mean, there was a couple weeks in which CJ Stroud won. I can tell you that for a fact because I played him the week he scored 50 points. I played against him. I think Caleb Williams is more than capable of doing that, especially on this team that's this loaded. But like I said, the thing you have to be worried about with rookie quarterbacks is just how much the coaches are willing to let them do in the early on in the season. CJ Stroud did have struggles early on in the season. He had games where he had very low numbers, and I would expect that from Caleb Williams as well. But I mean, man, if I had to say even somebody like Jared Goff or one of those kind of middle tier starters, I would not be upset at all if Caleb Williams is on my bench waiting to come in later in the year.
Guys, I do want to say, please like and subscribe. If you like the content we're bringing you and you want us to bring us, we rely on you. You guys are literally the show. So all the viewers out there, please like and subscribe. We do want to thank you once again, Cliff, for being here, Dante for being here, Bears Junkie for being here, D Burns, Aunt Moss, all you guys, week in and week out, show us support, show us love. We appreciate it. I do try to get to all the comments, guys. If I can, I at least try to show them. If there's something we can talk about, definitely going to talk about it. So you think that Caleb Williams has the ability, obviously probably because the roster that's around him has the ability to have a season similar to CJ Stroud, or you think we're setting the bar too high?
Oh, I absolutely believe he can have his season similar to CJ Stroud. I mean, with the talent that Caleb Williams has around him, with how NFL ready I believe he is, since he's been playing in basically NFL offense, and just his natural skill set. I mean, his skill set is instinctive. It really can't be taught. The arm angles, the pocket awareness, the athleticism. We talked about this before, right, Brennan? We call him pedestrian runs, very similar to Aaron Rodgers. It's like you look at Aaron Rodgers and you're like, well, he's certainly not super athletic. He can't run for a ton of yards, but then at the end of the game, he'll have 8 or 9 rushes for 50, 60 yards. I think Caleb Williams is capable of doing that. He's going to have rushing touchdowns. He did it his Heisman season in college. He had 10 rushing touchdowns. He's going to do that in the NFL. I think at some point, Caleb Williams is going to have games of 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and it'd be a good fantasy starter for people. I just don't. The problem with rookie quarterbacks is the same problem they had with C.J. Stroud last year. The problem is you just never know when they're going to come, right? I mean, you never know when they're going to come. He's going to have weeks where he has struggles, and he's going to have weeks where he looks like a seasoned vet. That's the problem with putting rookies into your fantasy lineup. You just never know what you're going to get for them. Call them boom or bust, right?
So I do want to bring something up, guys, and I'm going to credit this to Trax, but it's a conversation we should have because we're talking about the return game. We're talking about the impact Velus Jones could have, or Rome Dunze. These guys, they're gonna interchange. Speaking of punt returns, what's up with Fields, and how good could Fields be? I don't know if you guys saw it in the new Madden commercial for the new Madden game. Justin Fields is returning a kick. Will Justin Fields, Kyle, be a kick returner, punt returner, and will he have an impact on the Steelers team as a ball handler more so than a quarterback?
No, I do not believe that Justin Fields will be a kick returner, punt returner. They might get him in there to have, like you said earlier, so, some of these coaches have tricks up their sleeve. They pull these things that that's a little bit out of the norm. It's kind of like Rome Dunze. I expect him to return 4 or 5 kicks this year. Maybe I could see Justin Fields doing something like that. But ultimately, he is their backup quarterback right now, and you don't want to lose your second string quarterback, or then you're down to your third string quarterback. I don't think Justin Fields will be returning kicks and punts. I do believe that you will see Justin Fields play a little bit of that Taysom Hill role, where he can come on the field and the opposing team doesn't know if he's throwing it. They don't know if he's running it. They don't know if maybe even is catching it, like Taysom Hill played a little bit of tight end last year. I think Justin Fields is more than capable of doing something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Mike Tomlin pulled out all stops and found a way to score a touchdown. And I don't think he really cares how they score as long as they score. And I think that to Mike Tomlin is, if anybody in the NFL can get the most out of Justin Fields, he's the guy.
Sophisticated. I agree with you. It's a high risk play. Returns are just a play in which people get injured. So if they do lose Russell Wilson, I think they want Justin Fields to be available to play quarterback for them. I agree with you as well. Once they're in the red zone, you're probably going to see some RPOs with Justin Fields. And I do think that, as bad as he's been, and he's been bad, Najee Harris is going to have an uptick this year. And I think with Fields and Harris on the field at the same time, it's going to be tough for defenses to figure out who's actually carrying the ball once you're in the red zone.
Jalen Warren is certainly no scrub either. I think Jalen Warren has a better skill set than Najee Harris.
Sophisticated Thought says Booker will get 5.5 sacks at least. Calling it now, guys. Great pod. Thanks, Sophisticated Thoughts. We appreciate your love. And I think if that happens, if Booker is able to get, because that's a pretty big number for a rookie who they're calling a project player. If that happens, I don't think, we talked about with Taylor earlier, whether or not the Bears will have to make a splash trade for an edge rusher. If Booker's able to get 5.5 sacks this year and Javon Dexter takes that leap, I don't think the Bears are going to be concerned at all about pass rush. So I hope that you're right, Sophisticated Thoughts. I do think Booker's got the potential to be that guy eventually. I don't know about his rookie season. I don't know how they're going to use him. Is it going to be, coming off the end? Is he going to kind of play that blitz package role where he's the linebacker rushing the quarterback? We know he's fast. And
the problem for us in particular is Bears fans have almost been scarred by this 4th, 5th round defensive end in the draft. How many times have we heard this? Travis Gibson and Dominic Robinson. We've been told time and time again that these guys are going to come in. They're built like NFL defensive ends. Once they get bigger, stronger, faster, once they learn the scheme, they'll be one of the best defensive. We've heard this time and time again. I don't think Dominic Robinson makes this team, to be honest with you. And Travis Gibson certainly never get turned into what they told us he was going to be. I hope it's different for Austin Booker. I really do. But I think it'd be really, really smart for the Bears to ease him in as slowly as possible. I just think you don't want to overwhelm these guys. If I were the Bears, I would focus solely on getting Austin Booker NFL big, physical, put him in the weight room.
Yeah, and
introduce him to the NFL workout.
For Travis Gibson, I think it was just too much. He came in from college football as a defensive end. He was moved to an outside linebacker in a 3-4, and the Bears switched back to a 4-3. The guy there was no consistency there for him to develop in any system at all. And I know he didn't do very well in the Titans, but I I don't know. We talk about Justin Fields, and it's so easy to see it in a quarterback. Like he didn't have the system to succeed. I don't know that Travis Gibson was ever given the ability to lock down and play one role, and that hurt his development. And I don't know that he'll ever be a good player. Probably not at this juncture. But he was a guy that I thought he had the body to play the position, the defensive end position in a 4-3, and the Bears kept kind of moving him around. And I'm glad he's not a Bear anymore because I don't think that he's going to end up being that guy. But I thought there was a year, I think he had 7 sacks and 5 forced fumbles. I thought after following that season, he was going to take another leap, and then they switched their defensive scheme again, and it was probably too much for him to handle.
Well, I mean, and it's the same for Dominic Robinson. I mean, Robinson, the Bears last year were starving for a defensive end, for starving for anybody to make a play, get a sack, and nobody could do it. I mean, if those guys, they really don't have nobody to compete with. Dominic Robinson was on the field a ton. I mean, it just seems, and I'm not saying Austin Booker's the same thing. I think Austin Booker certainly has more talent and is a better name even than Dominic Robinson or Travis Gibson. I'm just saying, pump the brakes a little bit, guys. I would be ecstatic if he ended up getting 5.5 sacks this year, but I wouldn't be disappointed at all if he ended up with 1. As long as you can see him developing and he's starting to hit the weight room and get NFL big and NFL ready. That's all I'd like to see. I'd like to see him take steps forward this year. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, Cliff agrees with you. He says Booker needs some training. Hopefully, he learns fast. I would imagine he means physical training, like in the weight room. Trax did mention earlier that Montez Sweat has had a lot of good things to say about Devin Booker. From all the photos I've seen from training camp, it seems like Booker's kind of glued to Montez Sweat's shoulder. He's kind of in his pocket. Seems like he stayed close to him, which, as Taylor aforementioned, one of the most important things, guys, for these young guys is just to learn as much as they can from the people who are doing it at the level they want to, right? So if I'm Austin, if I'm Booker and I'm on this team and I want to know how to be a successful NFL edge rusher, that's probably the guy that I'm going to stick to as well. Montez Sweat. Let's dive a little bit more into Caleb Williams, Kyle, because we talked a lot with Taylor about it before you came on the show. She was a little bit of a Justin Fields fan. I think she said she had her a little bit of hesitance in the buying into who Caleb Williams was off the field, especially. She said more so than as a player. I've liked the guy for years. I've probably not been very fair to Justin Fields based on the talent that the Bears put around him, but Caleb Williams has proven to us now that he's at least the guy, the person that can lead a football team. I think he's shown that to Ryan Poles, that Matt Eberflus, to us as Bears fans. Do you think that Caleb has more struggles or success as a rookie coming into this 2024 season with a 7-win team and a roster that we probably haven't seen offensively, a roster we haven't seen in our entire lives?
Well, I mean, Caleb Williams is going to struggle, and I'm not saying, guys, he's going to come out and he's going to Mitch Trubisky. I'm telling you, it's just he's a rookie in the NFL, and that's what happens. These guys struggle. Even if you go back and watch CJ Stroud's every single game from start to finish, as much as he had amazing plays and did amazing things, he also has his rookie struggles where he threw bad interceptions, got himself, and especially actually later in the season, CJ Stroud was really good at not turning the ball over early, and it got worse as the season went on. But he's going to have the struggles, just like CJ Stroud did, just like every rookie quarterback that comes to the NFL. I think it's going to be more of a week-to-week basis, how good the competition is, what the defense is throwing at him. A lot of these defensive coordinators don't know what to expect from Caleb Williams. They don't know what his strengths are. They don't know what his weaknesses are. So you're going to see a lot of stunts and a lot of different things to try to throw his timing off and try to throw the timing of the offense off. And some teams will succeed at doing that, and some teams will not. I think you're going to see Caleb Williams have games where he throws for 150, 160 yards and a touchdown, a couple interceptions. And I think you're going to see Caleb Williams have games where he throws for 290, 310 yards and 3 touchdowns. It just kind of depends on who he's playing. But realistically, at the end of the day, I think Caleb Williams is 100% the future quarterback for the Chicago Bears. I think he is probably going to be the first 4,000-yard passer, the first 30 touchdown passer.
At what point do you think Caleb goes from? Because we know, like you said, early he's a rookie, and no matter how much hype there is around the kid, he's a rookie, and this is a tough league, one of the toughest professional sports to transition to from college ball. It's almost 2 completely different sports. How quickly do you think Caleb goes from playing within the system to playing Caleb's ball, to taking shots and winning games?
So the experts say you don't judge a quarterback until he's played 35 games in the NFL. Right now, I'm not saying that he needs 35 games to become Caleb Williams, but I think for the entirety of his rookie season, they're going to limit him a little bit. I don't expect to see too many games where Caleb Williams is throwing the ball 50 times. Like I said, even if you do see something like that, I think it'll only be if the Bears are down by a lot. If they're
Well,
down
let me
three
ask you this.
touchdowns.
Week 2, they're playing a Houston team that's, I mean, after last year with um, D'Amico Ryan, the really strong run defense and a below average pass defense, the worst safety tandem in the NFL. Do you think that's a game where we're going to already see by week 2? You think we're already going to see Caleb having to take shots to win a game, or do you think they're going to force him to take the, move the chains, take the check downs, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that defense or if that game actually ends up being more of a defensive battle than most people think it is. I think a lot of people are circling that game on the schedule right now and saying, "Oh, it's going to be a shootout." I don't necessarily know if that's true. I think the Houston obviously improved their pass rush by adding Danielle Hunter, and I think Will Anderson's only going to get better, right? I think that's one of the games where I believe that Caleb Williams will probably be under duress quite a bit. I think he's going to have to out of the pocket and make plays. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Bears lose that game because Caleb feels like he's forced to do a little bit too much. Maybe like a lot of people call it hero ball because yeah, it's going to be that, and like you were talking about the Houston secondary, they're also pretty young, so they should be getting better as well. Jalen Petre is going to end up being a good player in this league at some point. I think we all know that, but I would expect Caleb to be kind of in between where you would say like the best quarterbacks in the NFL are and the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. I think I wouldn't be, the best quarterbacks in the NFL are those guys who can throw 300 yards and 3 touchdowns almost every game. I would be happy if Caleb Williams is throwing 250 yards and 2 touchdowns every game. If he could average that the entirety of the season, anywhere from 240 to 260 yards and 2 passing touchdowns a game, I would be ecstatic with that. I'd be happy. I think every Bears fan would be.
I don't want to upset the viewership here, guys. I don't want to upset any Bears fans out there, but we're going to dive into another subject. So we talked about 3 players that might make a leap forward or improve and make a big impact on this team this year. Tell me about 3 players you think you're concerned about.
Well, I think you and I agree that number one would be Nate Davis, right? I mean, I think if you went into a room with Ryan Poles and asked him, what contract over the last 2 years would you regret the most? I think it would be easy for him to say Nate Davis. I mean, it doesn't seem like the guy likes to practice. Last year we were told that his mother passed away, and that's why he wasn't on the practice field. And more power to him. He shouldn't be there. Something like that. That's obviously something very personal, and we don't know exactly what the dynamic was there. I wasn't upset to see him not practicing because obviously a death in the family can be detrimental to anybody. But this year I really don't see any excuse. I don't know why Nate Davis was continuing to ride the bike on the sidelines for all of OTAs. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think Nate Davis he needs to prove it this year. If he comes out and plays like he did last year, that was a huge miss by Ryan Poles, probably the biggest miss since Chase Claypool. Another guy that worries me a little bit is the Ryan Bates they got from Buffalo. I mean, if you go back and look at Ryan Bates' numbers on Pro Football Focus, he actually had a pretty good grade when he was in the guard position. If you go look at his snaps at the center position, he did not have a good grade. He was actually one of the worst graded centers on Pro Football Focus last year. That scares the hell out of me. I think ultimately that's going to end up being the Bears starting center. And it's going to be another year we're talking about the same stuff, right? We talked about this with Sam Usfer. We talked about this with Cody Whitehair. We talked about this with Lucas Patrick. I don't want to have the same conversation again, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're talking about how bad that interior of the offensive line is. So Nate Davis and Ryan Bates would be 1 and 2. Another guy that I would probably say I'm the most worried about on the Chicago Bears would be Zach Pickens. It just seems like Zach Pickens, the same things we were hearing about in college, right? He's just not getting it. He's just not. He's he's big, strong, fast, but it's not. He can't bring it all together. It's there's something missing in between the ears. He can't master the NFL defense. I'm worried that it's likely headed down that road as well. Now, like I said, we don't know anything about Zach Pickens, but that's what concerns me the most is the Bears. It's not like they had a superstar defensive line last year, right? You wish you would have seen the rookies a little bit more because the guys playing in front of them certainly weren't keeping them off the field. So why were they giving Zach Pickens such little playing time? I think maybe, if you say that Ryan Poles missed on Nate Davis, a 3-year, $30 million contract, he missed on Ryan Bates, a center for a rookie quarterback, which we know is probably the most important position on the field for a rookie quarterback, and he missed on Zach Pickens, who was a 3rd-round pick. Last year does not look as good as it did going into the beginning of last year.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. Nate Davis is obviously number one on my list. And again, I hate questioning players for not so much talent or the ability to play the game. It's effort, and I don't his participation concerns, I think, the Bears, but his effort concerns me the most. I don't know how much. When they asked him why he wasn't there for OTAs, he said, "I'm not an OTA guy." That was literally his response. I don't know what that even means. You're a guy who missed a majority of last offseason. You had some issues. I understand he had some problems with family matters, but he didn't play well, and you would think that he
I mean, you saw the transition from practice to playing, right? I mean, he was in a new system last year. He never practiced, and when he was on the field, he looked lost, right? We talked about this numerous times, you and I, Brandon, after games. He looks lost. There's a couple. You can find a couple pictures from last year where Nate Davis almost looks like he's blocking one of his own players. I mean, he just did not look like he fit in that system, and I think it's probably due to lack of practice or lack of cohesiveness from the unit because he never played with them.
And you would have thought that Nate Davis would have correlated his struggles last season because he was a good player in Tennessee to the fact that he missed a lot of the offseason, and then he starts this offseason by just not showing up. And that's where I'm talking about effort. It bothers me to feel like a guy who's getting paid pretty substantially by this Bears team and who didn't live up to him. I would imagine his own expectations doesn't put in the extra effort this year. It bothers the hell out of me, guys. And I'm going to move off the offensive line. My biggest concern, and Taylor touched on it, is DeMarcus Walker. He's currently on the top 10 cap hits for the Bears, so that's got to concern you because he's not a top 10 productive player on this Bears roster. And another thing that bothers me is when Yannick was playing for the team, when Yannick was healthy, Walker was playing a little bit better, but when Yannick went down and Walker got more opportunity, he just fell apart. I mean, he provided nothing, and that to me says he's a motor guy, right? So if he's got to be on the field for almost the entire game, he gets worse. So you have a guy in Nate Davis with effort, and you have a guy in DeMarcus Walker with motor, and I don't know where those two fit in if they don't quickly progress, right? If we're not talking by week 3, week 4, like, oh, this guy looks so much better than last year, I don't know what kind of place they hold for the remainder of the season. I would put Booker in over Walker if he's not producing. So that I would say those are my two biggest concerns. My third concern would probably be, I don't know, the center. I don't know if I like Coleman Shelton or Ryan Bates. Neither one of those guys appeals to me. Maybe somebody wins the job. But if the Bears can get a deal done with Connor Williams that makes sense, I would jump all over it. Guys, I do have a prediction from Trax, Brennan Trax. He says, how many rushing touchdowns will Caleb Williams get? This is a subject we don't talk about a lot because we're expecting 30 passing touchdowns and 4,000 yards. He says 5 to 6. Or no, he says 5 to 8 and 300 to 500 yards rushing. I think I had Caleb Williams at around 370 yards rushing. Probably about 3 to 5 touchdowns myself. So, Kyle, where do you think Caleb Williams falls in regard? Because we just watched, the one thing we can say about Justin Fields is we watched one hell of a rushing quarterback, right? I mean, the guy put on a show with his legs. I forget what did they start calling him?
Who was that?
Justin Fields. Something
Start
wrong.
calling.
He had a nickname regarding his ability to run the ball, but he was 1,000-yard rusher, basically, right? He almost broke.
Second highest rushing yards for a quarterback in the history of the NFL.
So,
And he missed 3 games that season.
where do you think Caleb Williams falls in terms of touchdowns and yards and rushing the ball?
I'd like to see Caleb somewhere between 300-400 yards rushing and somewhere between 5 and 10 touchdowns. Somewhere in between there, I'd be happy. I don't want. Obviously, you don't want Caleb Williams to be running like Justin Fields did. Eventually, all those guys seem to get hurt at one point or another if they're getting hit that many times. But I would like to see Caleb Williams use his legs to keep the defense on their toes and kind of never really, kind of always wonder what he's going to do. And then to Dante here, he says rookie QB struggle on bad teams. I'm comparing Caleb to Purdy, Roethlisberger, or Flacco. Yeah, you're right. Dante, I like the optimism, I like the enthusiasm. I think the Bears have a good team and they put a good team around Caleb. The problem is you're comparing him to Brock Purdy, who has one of the best. All 3 of those guys listed there have some of the best coaches in the NFL. We just don't know that about Matt Eberflus yet. Those guys like Brock Purdy, he's part of a system. Kyle Shanahan's one of the probably the best offensive mind in the NFL right now, and Brock Purdy is the benefit of it. And Caleb Williams does not play. Matt Eberflus is not Kyle Shanahan. So I'm not saying that Caleb Williams can't come out and have a great season. I'm saying everybody just temper your expectations. And if he doesn't have one of the best seasons of any rookie quarterback in NFL history, don't give up. Don't get down. Don't be pessimistic. That's just part of growing pains, guys.
Do you think Ryan Bates' struggles as a center were because he was removed from the guard position? How much stock do you put into the fact that the guards around him probably weren't as good as he was because they had to use Bates at center?
Well, Tevin Jenkins is one of the best guards in the NFL when he's healthy. So I think, once again, we talked about this earlier, right? If you have those guys, the Darnell Wright and the Tevin Jenkins there, I think they can kind of mask some of the deficiencies the Bears have in offensive line. But I mean, from what I said, I can't sit here and tell you that I watched Ryan Bates play guard and center in Buffalo. I haven't gone back and watched his tape. You probably can't even find that, but all I can do is go on to the Pro Football Focus and see what their grade is. And like I said, when he was at center, it was not a very good grade. The thing I think the Bears are going to do with Ryan Bates, I think they're going to move him a lot. I think that he's good in open space and he's good at getting to the second level. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he plays he pulls a lot for the Chicago Bears.
He's a really athletic player. He is. He gets to this. He's quick, and I don't see that so much in Coleman Shelton. Coleman Shelton might be a better player at reading pressure because he's played the center position a lot more games than Ryan Bates has. So I
agree with you, Bernard. I think Connor Williams is the answer. Right? I mean, it couldn't be any more obvious. Finally, the Bears have a huge hole on their roster, and there's a guy out in free agency who at times they said was the best center in the NFL last year. I mean, this is like a match made in heaven, right? These are 2 puzzle pieces that fit together perfectly. The Bears have to try and go and get Connor Williams. The only problem with Connor Williams is he probably won't be healthy enough to start until week 5 or 6, coming off the injury last year. So the problem with Ryan Bates is I think the Bears can mask that the deficiencies of Ryan Bates at center. Problem with Ryan Bates is he's not the kind of guy where you're going to run the running backs. You're going to run right behind him, right? He's just not a power center. You're going to have to end up running behind guys like Tevin Jenkins or Darnell Wright. Well, when you're on first and goal from the 1-inch line, you want to be able to just run the ball right up the middle, right? Or maybe even QB sneak or do the tush push like you see in Philly. But I just don't think with the Nick Davis there and Ryan Bates, the Bears don't have the interior and offensive line to do that. And you'd like to see them build that because it's very important for a rookie quarterback. If pressure up the middle is what throws the timing off for offensive. So you'd like to see the Bears address this. I wanted to see them address the center position in the offseason, and that's, for me personally, is the biggest disappointment this offseason. I mean, you and I have talked about it, Brennan. Lloyd Cushenberry is a very good center, very underrated. Wasn't paid like a superstar by any means necessary. The Bears could have. I would rather have seen the Bears bring Lloyd Cushenberry in than bring DeAndre Swift in. But it's going to be interesting to see. Connor Williams just announced his camp. His agent just announced that he's looking to make an active roster and get back into football.
And
So
we're all familiar with that agent, guys.
yeah, and so it's not to let the bidding begin, right? We're about to see. I honestly 100% believe, and this is rare to say for any Chicago sports fan of any sport, football, basketball, baseball, but I think the Bears are going to be involved in that bidding war. I really do.
Yeah, guys, and let's remember before. I hear a lot of people saying to me like, "Oh, supposedly Connor Williams will be healthy before the start of the season." The guy tore his knee in December. And Drew Rosenhaus has a magic mouth, right? The guy's a salesman. He's going to tell people what they want to hear. He's going to tell teams what they want to hear. But if Ryan Poles brings this guy in, he's going to do a medical. He's going to do the physical. Ryan Poles is going to know if there's an issue there, and he's going to do his due diligence. I still like Connor Williams, like Kyle said. I still think he's a player who's valuable to you later on in the season. If it has to be week 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it might be, I still think he's the guy. But I don't think if he signed by the Bears today, I don't see him suiting up for training camp. I really don't. I see him
I would like to see them hold him
jogging
out.
on the sideline.
Yeah, hold him out till week 3. I mean, there's just no point to rush it. If you're going to go out and spend the money on a player of that caliber, play it safe, right? Let him get back into football shape. Let him make sure that knee feels all right, that leg feels all right, and then once they're really, really, really comfortable with it, then putting him in. I would project, my projections would be around week 4 or 5, which I'd be fine with. I mean, it's, if anything, at least you'd have something to look forward to.
Yeah, for all Bears fans out there, Drew Rosenhaus has a silver tongue. Just take that with a grain of salt when that guy tells you this player is ready to go. I highly doubt that a center in the NFL, an offensive lineman, can play on the knee that he tore in December. I mean, you're talking about there's a lot of weight and pressure coming down on those guys. These defensive linemen now are 330, especially in the middle. I mean, I don't see him suiting up for the Bears. If they signed him now, I don't see him suiting up for a while.
Well, if he does, that'd be awesome. But we've seen this before, right, Brennan? How many times were we told last year that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back before the end of the season, coming off a torn Achilles? But it's just not practical. I think sometimes they do this. They create stories like this.
And the Jets understood that it's stupid to try. More importantly, too, you don't want to force that issue. You don't want to rush somebody, especially like you said, Kyle. If they're going to pay this guy a decent amount of money, which they're going to, there's going to be a bidding war for Connor Williams. They're going to have to pay him a lot to get him here, and I don't want to see him week 1. I really don't. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Well, we're kind of getting towards the end of this, guys. We do, again, I want to appreciate Sophisticated Thoughts, Dante, Cliff, he had to go, Cal Sports Podcast, Tracks, obviously. Everybody who's in the comments, we had over 150 in the chat right now, guys, on a holiday weekend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate your love, guys. What are your plans for this 4th of July, Kyle?
Well, unfortunately, I'll probably be working tomorrow morning. I will also do other work besides the bartending gig, but I'll probably do some work in the morning, and then probably just spend it with my girlfriend and our 4-month-old daughter at night. Maybe sit outside, enjoy the weather, and maybe crack a beer. How about you?
I am going up to kind of central Wisconsin tomorrow in the morning, and I am tubing down a river. And yeah, that should be a good 5 hours of just floating away with all my stress and problems floating out of my mind. So that should be fun.
Are you guys going to see fireworks? I'm not a big firework guy. I don't know about you. I really don't care about them.
I took the kiddo to see fireworks when I had her this last weekend. Personally myself, I don't care to. We got 2 dogs here that don't react well to fireworks, so that's we'll probably spend the 4th, the night of the 4th.
You guys are kind of no man's land over in Union there. Do you guys even do you hear the fireworks at your house ever?
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool, man. There's a little patio on the 2nd level. There's a little balcony that we can watch like 3 different cities shoot their fireworks from. So if I really wanted to see them, I could see them from home. Yeah, we got 1 dog that just doesn't handle it too well. So we'll probably have to be home for that. Make sure he's not having an anxiety attack. And then possibly going to see a rodeo on Friday. That should be interesting. People riding bulls. Not something I would ever do, but God bless them. Yeah, and then I think that's about it. Probably just some farm work over the weekend. Get some stuff done around the barn. We get some.
A big birthday shout out to Sean Lugo. Tomorrow, 4th of July, America's birthday is actually Sean Lugo's birthday as well.
Shout out to Sean. Happy birthday, Sean.
Yeah.
Hmm.
He was. I usually spend it with him, but he's going to be actually up in Wisconsin. I'm sure they'll be blowing off fireworks up there. Obviously, there's no firework. I don't believe there's any firework restrictions up there. Is there?
I'm sure he'll be blowing off fireworks. Yeah, that's where you go to
You
get
can,
them.
yeah, I mean,
Indiana.
you can blow off anything in Wisconsin you want, right? I believe. I don't think there's any restrictions. I'm hoping where my girl and I live is pretty wide open. I'm hoping maybe we can see something off from a distance. But like I said, I'm not a huge firework guy. I'm not too concerned about it.
Is there anything in the world of sports related to Chicago, or really anything that you feel like we've missed on?
No, I mean, once again, we can just talk about how disappointing it is. As a Cubs, Sox fan, Blackhawks fan last year. Hopefully the Chicago Bears can finally give Chicago sports fans something to look forward to. I mean, I
do.
didn't expect the Cubs to be championship contenders, but this has been heartbreaking.
I do like what the Bulls are doing right now. I really do. And speaking of heartbreaking, guys, and I'm sorry to drive you all away. What the hell happened to USA in the America Cup? Like, I I lost to Panama, I lost to Uruguay. I thought this USA soccer team was like moving in the right direction. That broke my
Well, the,
that
well, the
broke
refs the refs wasted no time red carding one of the USA players. I mean,
yeah, but
the
way
USA
way
never
out.
played Panama.
He punched a guy in the face, so that's not gonna. He's suspended for like 3 months, man.
Yeah, I mean,
But,
being down a man certainly did not help their cause. That's for sure.
well, and their goalie got injured as well. So yeah, that didn't go the way I anticipated. I didn't think they were gonna be there with Argentina at the end, but thought they'd at least win a few. That got ugly quick. Um, yeah, we just want to wish everybody a happy, healthy, safe 4th of July, guys. Don't do anything Kyle wouldn't do.
Yeah, I want to give just a shout out to TC's World of Wonders, uh, Bridges Scoreboard, River Street Tavern, all of our sponsors. As always, we really appreciate them. We appreciate you guys, all the listeners. We appreciate the comments. Thanks a lot,
Yeah,
guys. We appreciate the support.
we want to give a huge shout out, guys, to Taylor Dow. I think she said it was Tay Dow 1010, I believe, on Twitter. If you just Google Tay Dow, you'll find her on Twitter. That's what I did today. Um, really good at what she's doing, guys, and I think she's going to be one of the people you start to see and hear a lot in the future of this industry. Really awesome for her to share her time with us on the holiday weekend. She's out there in Jacksonville, so very, very, very cool to get a chance to talk to her, which was provided by Brandon Trax. As always, Trax, we appreciate the opportunity to meet, new people in this industry and kind of expand our horizons a little bit. Kyle, thanks for coming on. I know we were both a little confused about what the hell was going on tonight, what time. We also want to say this, guys. I really, really like it, and I don't want to get too much into it. It's his business. Trax had a little bit of an accident today. We're very glad that he's safe and sound, that he's going to be able to enjoy the holiday with his family after what happened today. I know he's in a pretty severe car accident, so happy that Trax is okay. He's the guy that keeps this thing running, keeps this thing moving forward. He's the fuel to the fire, if you will, the oil to the machine. So thanks, Trax. Thanks for having us on here. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to meet Taylor tonight. Always fun to do a show with you, Kyle. And everybody have a safe and happy 4th of July.
Yeah, have a good 4th of July, guys. Thanks, Trax. Appreciate you, man.
Bear down, Chi-Town.